Hi, this is Dr. Scott. Today we're going to go through the fifth of this series of the history of the Fed. Now, some of you are going, I don't need to worry about this stuff. Hey, man, if you don't believe in NARA, you need to watch this. If you don't believe in a gold-backed currency, you need to watch this. If you don't believe that the IRS is going away, you need to watch this. If you're not sure exactly what's going on after post-election and you think that everything's just going to be hunky-dory, you need to watch this. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay, let's get into it. So the history of the Fed, this fifth of the series, I'm going to go through the other part really quickly here. Make sure that you always go to drscottyoung.com so you can find the right sites and the downloads only there. Please, guys, don't go to these other places, right? People ask me all the time, where's the QFS sites? They're fake. Stop doing fake things. Okay. The first part is creation of the nation to 1907. Now, let's get into the basics of this. Dr. Louisa, a friend of mine, she actually did a really good job of explaining the 14th Amendment coming in 1868. And basically what it says is the validity of public debt is invalid, in essence, if it is incurred through insurrection and rebellion. All such debts, obligations, and claims shall be illegal and void. What the flock does that mean? It means the Fed, as a central bank, has been operating throughout the world through CIA issues. Right there, the federal debt of the $36 trillion that came up here just the other day, and all the debts that you have done through central banks, because central banks drive all the debt points that happen. I don't care if you get it through your local bank. They have to be FDIC approved. All debts are canceled by constitutional means. We're going back to a constitutional republic. It's pretty cool. Okay. Central bankers have been screwing with you for generations. They started right after the Civil War. Revolutionary War. They created their first central bank. Well, there's always a crisis point that happens, and these are debt cycles. You see, when you start with debt and you live on debt, think about if you're a college student, you have debt, right? What happens is there's going to be an end point in your debt if you just live on debt. And well, guess what? That first one was the War of 1812, a war that didn't make any sense. I mean, if you study World War of 1812, first off, it doesn't happen in 1812. It goes on through 1814. Why is it 1812? Why did the Brits come in through Canada? What are they doing? Why did they leave so fast? They didn't accomplish anything. Oh, we kicked them out. Did we? Or did we just agree to make the payments back? Yep, that's what you think. 1836, Andrew Jackson. Donald Trump is a huge fan of him. He's got a picture of him. Andrew Jackson kicks the butt of every single central banker, kicks them out. But then they show up again during the Civil War. Civil War has got much more to do with sovereignty issues and central bank issues, because Lincoln brought on the greenback dollar through his Congress at that time frame, and the money lenders hated him, and they killed him for it. Now, 14th Amendment sets out the penalties for future cabal, and they hated it. So what they did is they created a new constitution so that everything that they would build upon it was in a different direction. See, when Kamala would talk about the Constitution, or Chuck Schumer talks about the Constitution, they're talking about a different Constitution, and it's kind of messing with people. And I know when you hear this, you go, I don't get it. What they did is just grammatically adjusted the sucker to see that difference. And basically what they're saying is, this is ours, that's yours, I don't care about yours, we're living on ours. Okay. And it leads to massive bank runs all the way through the late 1800s into the 1900s. Bank runs are all about them perceiving some weakness in a bank, but they actually have an ulterior motive to collapse the bank. They love doing this. They know exactly what it's going to do. Okay. Now, part two, we have the weird portion of the Titanic, a fascination I've done for my whole life. I've spent time on this particular thing. I didn't even know why I was doing this. I mean, when I study something, I'm going to go so deep it's not funny. Why do anyone who's ever watched the movie Titanic, spent any time looking at it, first class passengers got off the boat fast? How come the three richest first class passengers don't get off the boat? Oh, but they also don't agree with Fed in 1912. Wait, the Fed hadn't even come into existence. Oh, they all knew it was coming. And J.P. Morgan and these Kabbalists of the time frame found a way to kill off 1,500 people to cover up these murders. You guys might look at me like I'm freaking nuts. Go study it. You'll find out. Now, what Wilson was trying to do is bring on the Fed. And he was even disappointed with himself in this. What the Fed comes on, and then we start with World War I. World War I is 30 million people dying with billions of dollars of debt. Created the Versailles Treaty that ruined and created a massive fiat currency that was worth billions of dollars billions of Reichsmarks just to buy a loaf of bread. This is the most massive inflation since, now later on we would have Venezuela, whose Bolivar is out of this world crazy. Think about also Vietnam, the Vietnam Dong, that is made in the millions and millions just to buy small items. How about Iraqi dinar? When you kind of go, wait a second, don't we have a war? Didn't we have a war in Iraq? Yeah. Didn't we have a war in Vietnam? Mm-hmm. Weren't we messing with the cartels in Venezuela? They keep playing the same thing out. When you look at the 16th Amendment, it doesn't read like the 14th Amendment or any other amendment. It's very non-specific. When IRS was created, 1913, by the way, too. 1% of Americans would have 1% of their money come out. Oh, but then after in 34, you had to pay this. Created inflation, and they were kind of messing with the Constitution. First article under the 8th section and the 10th section stipulates gold and silver and no debt upon those. Okay. The Bloody Valentine shooting of Valentine's Day, 1929, was the exact same time frame that the Fed was creating their plan to destroy the stock market. And of course, in October, they did exactly that and bankrupted most of America. Now, we move into part 3, the gold standard and 9/11. The gold standard dies. Now, some people get this wrong, but 1933 is very, very important because what he did, what FDR did, and they used to love FDR, right? Goes from $20.60 a share up to $33 the next year with a fiat currency. So basically, they devalued every person who ever had a gold-backed dollar. And they did it under a penalty of a $10,000 fine. Now, what happens is we have a fiat currency at that time frame, backed by the Fed, and then was given value because the IRS plays a part of the game. It's a debt game. 1944. In the backdrop of 1944 are the island hoppings of America and Japan. The Stalingrad, massive defense. I mean, millions die in the Stalingrad issues. They were throwing bodies at people at both sides. We have America preparing and invading into France. One of the most destructive battles America went through. Not the most, but one of the most. Africa's still going wild, even through Sicily. And yet, the Kabbalists don't care. They're just coming up with their new plan to dominate the world. That everyone would pay for oil with this dollar bill. and they kept the pegging point $35 an ounce. Now, Nixon, big one. I'm probably gonna have to do a big jump on Nixon because he's such an interesting person. But we goes from gold at $35 up to through the 80s to $68. And so what they did is created a false flag of an oil crisis, created an inflation crisis, and massive increase of interest rates to levels we still haven't seen to this day. Now, the time frame of the 1970s, late 1970s, when inflation was like, I mean, interest rates were like 15% and more. I mean, they were just weird, but no one had a lot of debt. There was debt crisis, but they didn't have a ton of debt. Houses didn't cost what they cost today. And wages hadn't moved that difference between the shifting amount of what it would cost to do things versus the wages. Where now, if we had 15% interest, I mean, you would kill the country. Because right now, at 5 to 8% interest, it's wiping us out. And it's because of the massive increase of prices with that too. So this is a plan, okay? And again, I won't go through the process of this, but the IRS, and I have people all the time, including Peyton. Hey, Peyton, I love you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to beat up at you. And she was like, well, I think it was she, but she was saying, I think, the IRS goes away. Sure, that's fine. IRS, if you kill the IRS, you kill the Fed. You kill the Fed, you kill what the Congress does. If you kill off those kinds of things, you have to deal with the election issues. We'll get into that. They're all interconnected. Like it's part of a chain. And if you have a chain around your wrist or something like that, and one portion of the chain breaks, that's the weakness of the chain, right? So in the 70s, we have a massive increase of money all the way through, of gold, which creates a whole bunch of billionaires. They started creating a speculation of the dot-com time frame at 2000 and a massive stock market fall that no one was spending any time talking about. Now, in 2000, we have the hanging chads, Gore and Bush, right? It doesn't get resolved until approximately December-ish of 2000 and not get into a January 6th issue. Guarantee they were setting us up for 2020. Okay? But Clinton gets in office. When he was in office, he was getting out of office, and Bush is in office. When he's getting out of office, he was required to sign the NARA. I know you don't believe that, but it is out there. The reality is, Bush and Cheney should never have been out of the White House in 9/10, and yet Poppy Bush comes in and kills the first attempt of NARA. DOD fails the audit on the exact same day, so they steal most of the funds that were available in it. Those funds were supposed to be sitting in World Trade Center 1 and 2, and the computer systems, and World Trade Center 7 would have had the CIA documents to release the JFK files. Okay. Get into the Great Recession to 2020. So these ARMs, or adjusted rate mortgages kind of things, were wiping people out in the early 2000s. They didn't know it, but it was setting them up for failure that would only come up due in 2008, right? And so this banking crisis, and think about this, Paulson is the Treasury chairman who ran Lehman Brothers, who was the biggest offender of them all. In this way. And so we're talking about banks and insurance companies because what they were doing is ensuring fraudulent natures of this. And this is a systemic thing, right? I mean, when you hear the story of Enron's, there's a book and a video series called The Smartest Men in the Room, because they thought of themselves as that. But realize 2008 was the same kind of idea. Now, what you hear is the Fed, through Paulson, the Treasury, gave the bankers, the 13 Fed banks that drive all of other banking. So no other banking can work without Fed issues. Why? They have to be FDIC accredited. They can't operate, right? And we have all kinds of accreditation, things. And what you do is you take the profession and you put them underneath that, right? And so you can't work without the accreditation. Do you see the point? And you think that they got $250 billion that they bungled. No, they got way more than that. $83 trillion. This is where I started learning about Bitcoin and realizing, maybe it's got a blockchain, very trackable system. And I was told directly in 2013-ish, 11, 13, somewhere in that range, that Bitcoin was not going to be the gold-backed currency route. It was like, well, it's not going to be the Fed. Yep, because that's how they stole the money. What was it going to be? QFS, baby. It actually comes in the same time frame when Bitcoin comes on. And by the way, so does BRICS come onto the scene at the same time frame. Not because BRICS was thinking like the QFS, right? This is fascinating stuff. Okay. We think of the liquidity process in 2008 as the Great Recession, and yet 2020 to 22 was just as bad. Oh, but wait a second. 23, 24, it goes to new levels that not even the Great Depression went through. When you realize what they did is they started shifting the funds in 22-ish and beyond. This is when inflation goes to ungodly numbers, right? And they have unrealized losses that cannot be covered up. Let's kind of put it in another perspective, okay? Let's say you're a small business and you're a $1 million small business, right? decent size. You got 20 employees, whatever the circumstance is, right? And you got 10, 20 employees, whatever, and yet people think that you're in good shape because you're $1 million business, right? I mean, you're making a lot of money. And maybe the person's trying to take home $200,000 a year, whatever they might be doing. And yet you have $3 or $4 million of debt. Dude, this is how far underneath these companies are. The big companies are massively underneath for that. They expect another bank run. We're not going to give it to them. So don't worry about that stuff. Gold prices are going to unprecedented rates. The debt is up at $300 trillion. The reality is this. When most people thought the national defense is taking up 40% of the budget, the reality is now the deficit takes up 41% of the budget. Okay, so let's move on to the next phase, the whole phase, and we're going to do a few more things in here as well. Okay. Absolute Proof, done by Mike Lindell, was literally the coolest set of statistical data I had seen. Mike Lindell's a multimillionaire, doesn't need to put himself in the noose, just like Trump didn't need to put himself in the noose. He's still not acknowledged for his amazing role against the Dominion machines that are in 32 different states that have internet connectivity. But one in the truther community actually kind of messed with me a little bit. It was a while ago. Her name is Tori Says. I don't know if she believes in this or I don't care. But let me tell you what she had purported. And I kind of had to suss it out a bit. Is the case. They disconnected the internet connectivity in 2016. That's why Trump won. That's one of the most legitimate elections of a time frame. Now, don't get me wrong. There's always, we're talking about from an election fraud issue, right? Which is electronic stuff. No, were there ballot harvesting? Sure. Were there, dead ballots in there? That's a voter fraud issue I'll talk about in the next page here. But from an election standpoint, it freaked the deep state out. So what they did is they said, American people really do want Trump. And it pissed Hillary off. No, if that was a real Hillary or not. But they allowed the interconnectivity of internet issues in 2020 and 2022 and 2024. Okay. There was massive foreign interference. Now, China printed up these ballots that really had a watermark. What the heck does that mean? It means that you can't recreate it like on a dollar bill when they put watermarks on there that you can kind of see through it. Or if you look at the Vietnam, a dong, it's like see-through kind of abilities. There's all kinds of interesting things that they do. The ballots of 2020 and beyond were watermarked, so you couldn't fake them. But they were also in a very specific sizing that had to go through the machines, which we'll talk about that in a second. They had a GPS tracker. Trump knew in the day after 11/3 or 11/4 of 2020, he knew that they would drop a ton of ballots in Pennsylvania. They threw away a whole bunch of ballots in Texas. And Spain and Italy, he shows this, had cyber connections through the Dominion machines. We would only learn about some of that stuff in 2022 a little bit closer when Arizona was shown over and over again that you could easily connect into the machines. And no one wants to listen to this stuff, right? Because what they try to tell you is the counting was perfectly fine. This is the most, excuse me, Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, the Secretary of State, would say that 2020 was the most perfect election out there. Liar. How come most states never see more than 70% of the people voting? In 2020, 130% of registered voters voted in those swing states. 2,000 mules. Dinesh does a gorgeous documentary just the same way that Lindell does. And everyone hated it. And yet is statistically significant. Listen, as a person who's looked at statistics over the years, when you look at statistics, there's significant statistics. People talk about this all the time. Like I hear these people talking about, well, the polls will say Kamala will win. Polls are the most ridiculous piece of stat you'll ever see in your life. Now, I'm not talking about a poll that is done like on Twitter. You see some of the lefties that would do polls and they would get like 1 million votes. That's a pretty significant statistical standard that says that you have a large number, a large N number, okay? Versus the statistics that like CBS or CNN put out there of some lefty group that puts in maybe 65 people. How is that a good cross section and have a big enough N number? The answer is they're lying to you constantly with that. So what they did is it took people that were taking from 5 stash houses and dropping off to at least 10 boxes. That is, they ignored the one guy who was going to 3 different boxes, right? Or went to 2 stash houses and with 5 boxes. They took it up to a very high watermark part. Okay, use the watermark issue with that too. Watch the water. Interesting. All right. Then what they did is they found that there were 200 plus events in Arizona, 100 in Wisconsin, 500 and 1,000 in Pennsylvania. Think about that for a second. When you say that you made a high point, an N number to a crazy amount, these people aren't accidentally or shoving it or just had them in their back, porch and threw in a whole bunch of ballots. We're talking about systemic level voter fraud issues. And it happened on massive levels. They had geo-tracking to find these mules because they were using their idiot cell phones. There's massive surveillance. In the middle of the night, 3 a.m, people are like, wait, what are they doing? There were as many as 400,000 bad ballots, especially in Arizona. And what they would do is they would shove those ballots that were Chinese ballots that were 19-inch into a 20-inch printer, or a scanner. And when you have that, it invalidates because they're looking at the exact spot where you voted, right? You color in your vote. And what would happen is it would be off and then it would invalidate those things. So they gave real people invalid ballots and said they couldn't count them, right? They were just screwing with people left and right. If you look up 2000 Mules or Mike Lindell, they will tell you debunked, debunked, debunked. It was done through COVID safety issues, so a lot of mail-in. I mean, there are places that don't even have, you can't even do in-person voting. It's all mail-in voting. And then people say to me all the time, well, SCOTUS turned it down. Over and over, the states were turned down for anything in 2020. Why don't you get off of 2020? Because my own president says fix 2020. And let me tell you, if you are a lefty or a righty or an in-between or whatever, right? Have you ever had significant evidence against a court who you thought was fraudulent, who did the person dirty? If the answer is yes, then why are you trusting in supposed highest court of the land? Don't you think that they could be just as dirty? Come on, you know better. Now, sorry, let me move that thing a little forward. What are some conclusions that we can come up with 2020? Now, Biden gets 81 million votes. Hayden Biden, that's what they called him. He could get 6 people in circles. Trump was getting 20,000 people. In Pennsylvania, in his very last surprise stop, like 10,000 people showed up into a cornfield. Media, with their idiot polls, court support, led to January 6th. There is a 10-day requirement that all they had to do, the guys with oaths of office, I'm going to tell you, 14th Amendment on the 3rd section, railroads every single one of these idiots. And all they had to do for 10 days is just sit there and review them. No big deal, right? Did they do the job? Nope. Guess what? You're all fired. That's what the Brunson case is all about. The election fraud is so deep, as well as the voter fraud issues. It shows the cabal asked the world to participate in their fraud issues. Executive Order 13848 set in September 12th of 2018. Very interesting time frame. It's between the nomination time frames, or for instance, the party nomination, Democrat, Republican, and it happens for governors and all the different roles out there, right? It happens between that and a November election. Now, why is it in September of 2018? Let me pull off the screen for half a second here. Why 2018? And by the way, and I talk about this in a video that you can see this past Friday. Today is Friday. You would be seeing this on Friday, but this particular video you're going to see here is on next Friday, right? The 22nd. Now, listen to me for a second. If in 2018 he says, I declare a state of emergency, that's what he writes on there, and Hayden Biden, signs the same executive order into advance, including in September of 2024, do you see something that might be out there? The 14th Amendment of the 3rd section says if you have oaths of office and do an insurrection, and see, what did they claim against the J6 people? They were the insurrectors. Well, you have to go look at it, and you'll find out, who really did it? Nancy did it. Nancy Pelosi was all a part of this. And everyone who was in Congress and Senate and didn't stand up, sucks to be you. What are some of those issues? Now, we've seen there's 200,000 sealed indictments, and they're done by a lot of post office officials. 80% of those sealed indictments that are in the millions numbers are from election fraud issues. Those penalties are federal prison issues. Now, we're not talking about Gitmo stuff. I don't want to, we'll talk about that in half a second. But we're talking about election issues. So, like, how come these people, would come up, the ones that do this kind of stuff? All the mules and all the other issues and the ballot harvesting, or making a ton of money. They're always driving the new cars when they really don't afford that or have the ability to afford it. Where are they getting that from? It's both sides. It's not just Democrats, it's Republicans. Trust me, we can have tons of events of both of those issues out there. Those people are going to lose everything. And they're going to be in Rikers-based prisons like that in New Jersey, or about some of those Arizona prisons that are outside. And looking at 10, 15, 25 years. The Brunson case is so powerful, and I just already told you about it. The Brunson case basically says not just presidents, Senate, Congress, whatever, all of those people are out. It says that their staff members, 28,000 of them, are also out. And those elected officials that created the level of the treason that comes out. Gitmo, baby, because you just did penalties or treason against America. You're going to be paying. You're going to be surprised when you see some of this stuff. Do you fix 2020 by redoing a 2024 election? Kamala never won her primary, and yet California actually abstained at the beginning point of this. And then Gavin Newsom came in and said, we nominate her. Wait a second, what? You did? Are you sure of that one? Go back and if you watched the whole thing, you'd realize there's something more going on than you can possibly imagine with that. So a party nominated someone, but they called Trump a threat to democracy. Wait, so you guys don't have to have, you don't have to do anything to have, or you don't have to have voting in each one of the states. You voted for Biden, you pushed him aside, and yet you put Kamala on. You spent $1.3 billion spending $580 something million toward your own staff members and giving these idiots $1 million to $10 million per person, the morons in Hollywood, to sway a vote. Now, here's the funny thing. There was a video in October that said that Kamala won in Pennsylvania by 5%, and they said, oh, we accidentally put that out there. Now, I want to show you something interesting, and we're going to kind of adjust a little bit into a go back dollar with this conversation here. And I'm going to show you this little thing. You're not going to hear much out of it.
We've been looking for 4 years now for new money, and we finally found, they must be circulating it because we're getting a couple here and there. We finally found 2021 printed money. Janet Yellen, she only signed the 5s and the 1s. So, yeah, just wanted to show you. It's in circulation, I guess, guys. So we were saying all this time, we started in 2021, we started looking for new money. And these are printed in 2021. So we couldn't find any. We couldn't find any for this whole time. But they're coming out of Mac machines, so.
Crash the Matrix did this. This is really good. This is an older video. I was getting out money, and I was getting out change, and I was getting out like $250 in change, right? And I just got 5s because I didn't want to do the dollar bills, right? So I pull out them, And I was waiting for her to do another, the teller to do it. And this is actually on Halloween, so they're all dressed up really dumb. And so I looked. I was looking at the bills, and there's 2013 bills, 2017 bills, and 2021 bills like these, right? Not one of them are crisp bills. Now, if you don't believe in a go back currency and you don't believe White Hats are doing something, what in the flock do we have these old bills for? And you go, so every year before 2019, they made money every single year of every denomination out there. There's a purported statement that in 2025 they're going to be having all kinds of new bills. It's coming, baby. It's coming. I asked the woman at the teller, I said, "Have you heard those new bills that are coming out?" And she goes, "Yeah, they're coming out in November." She stopped herself when she could, the end of November. They know what's coming. Judy Shelton writes a book. I don't have it here, but she writes a book. She wrote two of them. One is called "Fixing the Dollar Now," 1994. She's talking about a gold-backed currency. She comes out with "Good as Gold." When you look at "Good as Gold," I have a crappy picture. Sorry about that. "Good as Gold" was actually, it looks like it was really written. When you kind of do this, because there's a video out there in 2023, and she has the whole book done. And then she updates it a little bit more. It's done by Independent Institute. The cabal hates her guts because she's talking about going back on a gold standard. And how come this book releases in October of 2024? Because it's time, baby. It's coming. Now I'm going to pull something up here. I want you to see this one. We'll come back to that one in a second. Now, Vivek, if I hope I said that right. You guys might hate when I say it. I want you to look at the guy in the background here. This is January of 2024. He's trying to run for president at the time. The nomination kind of phases. The dude in the background here, you're not going to hear him because I can't make it any louder. Sorry, but the closed caption's on there. The dude in the background is this, I would say, a Y or a Z generation young guy. He'll go throughout. There's TikTok videos of him going throughout wearing Kamala shirts and whatever, and he would ask people Trump or Kamala, and he's asking these people, very good at trapping information. This guy, I believe, is part of the new media. Not one of these media people ask a question in this way. Listen to his response to this amazing question.
I think they're wrong too. Thank you.
What's your thoughts on BRICS as a global organization and the U.S. dollar kind of losing its value, being back up basically nothing? How do you integrate?
Think about the question. He's just saying, what are you thinking about? He's saying the polls are wrong, because I agree. And he goes, the BRICS nations are coming out and they have a gold-backed dollar. And how do you integrate it with our dollar bill? This guy is asking next level questions. This is the same guy that if you can find him on TikTok. It's a very interesting kid, right?
I'm sorry, sir. Intelligent questions are not allowed in these press caucuses.
Think about what he just said. Intelligent questions are not allowed. He's making fun of totally. This guy's a pretty darn smart guy, right? And he's working with Elon here in a little bit. Whatever you believe about him doesn't really matter. It's going to be good.
You're only allowed to ask what is within the open window of established issues that do not matter to the future of this country. But you asked one that does matter to the future of our country.
He's telling you that fixing the gold-backed standard matters to our country. And none of these idiot reporters say any of this stuff.
I'll address it anyway. So, BRICS refers to the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa alliance that, among other things, is establishing a currency backed by gold, a gold standard, to replace the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. This is a major problem for the United States. This would permanently increase our borrowing costs if the dollar is no longer the established currency, the established reserve currency of the world, especially at a time where we're $34 trillion in national debt, which isn't a great time to increase your native borrowing costs from the dollar no longer being the reserve currency. So yes, actually, that does matter.
And I won't finish that one because it basically says, we're going to do that in our time frame. Okay, let me pull this one up here again. It's 1,000% fascinating what's occurring. Okay,
So we've been looking.
stop. The Fed through the Mint stopped printing in 2017. They did it. They did a few more in 2020. They know something's coming. All right. Now, NARA, I need to give you a little background on it. NARA, the National Economic Stabilization and Reformation Act. Okay, it comes into place that most people don't realize from the PPPs. Now, the Payroll Protection Plan comes in, and this is where I jump into the NARA thing. But I had no idea. I'd been studying about it for years, but I just had no clue what the word was. And in March of 2020, the CARES Act first comes out, the CARES 1 Act. It's a 1,000-page document. 1 month later, they write a 1,200-page document. I've had a IRS agent, very awakened woman who actually died in 2021, but wonderful woman, Fran, had read through both of those documentations and they were perfect pieces of legislation. I'm like, so what does that mean? She goes, you understand, they never make perfect pieces of legislation. Interesting. It introduces the PPP loans and it bypasses what it does. Those loans, whether you like them or not, I'm telling you, for small businesses like me, there's no way I would have been in business without them. I'm trying to pay my employees, and while the state is trying to shut me down and screw with me, but allowing liquor stores and Walmart to stay open, and yet a small business is not essential to them, right? So if I don't have the PPP loans, and here's the thing, as long as you use it for payroll things, which I did, I was like purposefully using it on payroll. You had to do 80% of it with payroll, and you had to prove it too. What happened is that it was free and clear money. I've never gotten that, and I got it twice. There's all kinds of other crazy monies that were coming in that were helping small businesses. And people never paid any attention of it. I did. Is the only way I stayed in business because I was losing things left and right. 50% of the friends of mine in business said to me, I wouldn't do the PPP. You know why? Because it was convoluted in its process. There was no payback point. There was no credit check. There was no personal guarantee in there. It's coming through the SBA, which is the Treasury portion, the Small Business Association. I could never be a part of it because I had personal loans even through the 2020 timeframe. I had personal loans through other places. So I couldn't ever sign one of those. And yet they didn't require that from me. It didn't even require a credit check, which I would have been fine on. And here's the funny thing. If I don't pay it back, no one makes any interest. What? SBA loans are just lower priced loans, okay? Pulling off the screen for a second. Lower priced loans. But someone gets paid back. Who gets paid back? The bank, right? The bank makes money because I make a $900 a month payment, whatever that is, for whatever loan I'm trying to get. That's how SBA loans work. It's just the Treasury is just a through port, but they're not making it. They make a little bit of money off of that issue, but they're kind of the bridge between the business owner and the bank to be a part of that. Just another way of doing that. And so in essence, they're kind of a guarantor, okay, or guarantor. And yet the PPP didn't have that. And guess what? If I get my money and then I don't have to pay it back, and the bank got money after I claimed that loan paid back or satisfied in essence. All I had to do is show that it was used for payroll. Just had to, I mean, it was like a 2-page form. Took like my accountant 15 minutes to do. Like, just craziness. And what happened when you study through that is that it sublimated the Fed, unhooked it from all its capabilities, and shoved it underneath the Treasury Department. This is brilliant level strategy. And ever since that moment in time, we have COVID that comes up. COVID was a cover to the NARA thing. Now, I know I didn't move the ball forward here a little bit. We're $36 trillion a day. I mean, the fiat is dying everywhere it goes. The debts are off the charts, cannot be payable. The debt to income ratio, I have 175%. I think it's more like 200% right now. There's more money or more gold ounces in America than has ever had it before. We're up at $2,700 an ounce. Do you know that the Treasury indicates, and I'm going to do a video with a Zester, who's a crypto guy, and there is a new thing that just came involved, and you got to catch me, and I'll put it up on the Telegram and the Twitter channels. You can watch this thing. And it'll be on his channel. But what it shows is as Congress is already telling you, we have to go to a go back money. Now, I always tell people, go watch episode 6 or season 6, episode 9, called Change Day. It's where they switch the money from a red currency to a blue. Red pill, blue pill. You can't make this stuff up. Okay. So in the basis of NARA, basically what we're going from is the old fiat currency to the U.S. Treasury note. If you have money in the bank, it'll just be switched without you don't have to worry about it. If you have cash, turn it in later on and deposit it, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's going to go really directly to it. A backed money. Because what I showed you in the 14th Amendment under the 4th section, debt forgiveness has to occur. All the debts have to be wiped out. It stops the IRS. It sets term limits. It goes back to constitutional courts, and it fixes the elections. That's why I'm telling you all this kind of stuff. Trump in 2020 kept saying, I'm going to sue China for $10 trillion. That was exactly the kind of money that we needed to flip us into a go back currency. It's been that's why we've been thinking about it from 2020, but there's a bunch of other things that happen. Judy Shelton's going to be the Fed chairman for a time. Steve Mnuchin is going to be that again. But they haven't even told you who is the Treasury chairman yet. Again, in 2017, Executive Order 13818, it says, if you have crimes against humanity, those persons with the serious human rights abuses do not get to move their money over. In essence, they don't get to be a part of the quantum financial system that will happen here. They get nothing. They get to hold their cash, just like if you watch the episode of MASH episode where Charles, Winchester is trying to default the people around him, the Koreans around him, and he gets nothing. He's hold the bag, and at the end of the episode, he throws the red money up. Weird. I'm going to come to this one here in a second, but let me show you a video that I actually showed it another way with this too.
The Fed's independence have been called into question. Utah Senator Mike Lee calling for an end to the Fed. In a tweet he wrote, in his words, the executive branch should be under the direction of the president. That's how the Constitution was designed. The Federal Reserve is one of many examples of how we have deviated from the Constitution.
Oops.
In that regard.
Guys, if you've watched me for a while, I said the same kind of stuff. How come only now it's being talked about out in the open? This has never been talked about before.
Yet another reason why we should, hashtag end the Fed. Our next guest says the senator is standing up for the Constitution with, in her words, courage and insight. And join us now, Independent Institute Senior Fellow Judy Shelton. She was one of President-elect Trump's original Federal Reserve Board nominees, also bringing to us the idea that the way the Fed is set up, that it benefited the big money setter banks, and it actually caused them to hoard money because they made $1 trillion combined between all of them instead of lending it out. So instead of questioning the way the Fed works, everybody's like, oh my God, this is heresy. It's almost like saying you're going to, get rid of, I don't know, apple pie and hot dogs or something.
Well, I think it has become kind of sacrosanct in a way that prevents us from talking about improvements at the Fed. And if the definition of central bank independence means no legislative oversight, if it means no limits on the financial capabilities of the Federal Reserve, and if it means no real accountability, the Fed often claims it has responsibility for stable prices, but nobody got fired after we had the worst inflation in 40 years. So I think it's...
Again, we can talk about that later, but I have a little longer video. You guys can watch this. But I want you to show you that when we have the nomination, the fake inauguration of Biden, that he does it in the wrong time frames. He gets inaugurated early, breaks the Constitution kind of points. Inside of the vehicle, as he's driving away, this is what he sees. I'm telling you, the military is in control. You watch this. Look at these guys here. They turn their back on him. They would never do that to the commander-in-chief. Not one of them have a salute on their hands. That is the presidential car. Do you guys understand? This is a military operation. You ask the question, why in the world has it taken so long for this thing to happen? And the reality is, because it's not time. Now, I'm telling you, this time is coming soon, very fast now. Trump getting into that pre-elected phase. We still haven't fixed the Congress. We still haven't fixed the Senate. Brunson case is coming, baby, and it's coming like a flood. And it's going to fix the things, but it's also going to come at the same time. We're going to have a gold-backed currency. We're going to see things just radically alter. It's going to be good, guys, but you got to understand your history, and that's why I have that faith. See, some people think I have hopium. It's the stupidest word in the world. Listen, I'm not smoking some hopium thing. I'm talking about faith. What is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the promise of things unseen. It intimates a level of research and substance inside of the evidence that you find. That's what faith really is. Belief is then the backward glance of that same issue. In Greek, they use the word pistis and pisteo. Pistis for faith, pisteo in belief. Faith is a forward glance, belief is a backward glance at what kinds of good things happened for you. So you operate that way, for instance, with marketing. If a business owner goes, I'm going to market, and he's thinking about like what he might do in that marketing point, he's thinking about backward glance. Well, what kinds of things worked for us? So let's employ that strategy from the past to the future. That's faith belief cycle 101. And guess what I try to do with you is use that belief, the faith issue of the forward glance and the belief of the backward glance. That's why you have to understand your history. Thanks so much.